Assalamualaikum. I think we've got a question and answer session in the last because there was some student or somebody he wanted to ask question from Dr. Mohsin. I'm not sure. What do you think, Dr. Manzar? The question and answer session is at the last.
Ji.
So, Dr. Manzar, I'll try to keep my presentation within 15 minutes. I hope you will not have to interrupt me again and again. But I was looking at Dr. Mohsin's misery. He wanted to tell you a lot more than what I have to tell you, but because of limitation of time, we'll try to, fly through my presentation. So I'm involved in educational activity of different pharmaceutical companies. So ankylosing spondylitis, much have been covered by Dr. Mohsin. Thank you, Dr. Mohsin, for that. It is a spondyloarthropathy, chronic systemic, multisystemic inflammatory disorder, primarily affecting sacroiliac joint and axial skeleton. And it's a chronic, progressive, debilitating disease. This is the latest term, which is much favorite of most of the rheumatologists, non-radiological axial spondyloarthropathy. And it is the term given when the damage is not evident on plain radiograph and the milder form of ankylosing spondylitis maybe. So if you look at this picture, there is a worldwide delay in the diagnosis of ankylosing spondylitis, and Dr. Mohsin was emphasizing again and again that once the damage has occurred, even surgeries are not that much helpful, and they are very much difficult to carry on with. The diagnostic delay is usually 8 to 10 years world over, and if the patient is luckily HLA-B27 positive, they are much earlier diagnosed than those who are HLA-B27 negative. And after 10 years, we expect most of the physical and radiological damage that has already been occurred. The inflammatory back pain, if some of you get this idea, get this message from here, I think my job is done. If you are able to distinguish between mechanical and inflammatory back pain, then nothing else needs to be done, and you can just simply refer the patient to the rheumatologist or maybe a physician in your community so that they can diagnose it earlier on. Dr. Mohsin showed a very beautiful table, but I would like to emphasize a couple of points that if the patient have back pain that started in the younger age group, usually before 40 years, there is a stiffness period after the period of inactivity that can be early in the morning. If the stiffness is more than 30 minutes, it improves with exercise versus with rest, especially at night, and it's insidious in onset. It's intermittent, meaning there are periods of reliefs or normal spine in between, then probably your patient is suffering from inflammatory back pain. Patient also has other symptoms like peripheral arthritis, enthesitis, and constitutional symptoms might be there, including fatigue, low-grade fever, weight loss, etc. This disease can also affect other part of the body like eyes, heart, lungs, renal, brain, GIT, and metabolic bone disease, as my previous speaker was mentioning, osteoporosis. Now, if we talk about a little bit about the spine, the first on your right is the normal spine, and then later on, I'm not sure if I've got a pointer or not. The first one is the normal spine, and later at the end of the vertebra, the tips of the vertebra, they become inflamed due to the insertion of the ligaments or tendons there. This inflammation gradually progresses and leads to the erosions and then final fusion of the spine. And at this point, the spine become immobilized or immobile, and due to this limitation of mobility, the patient posture that was emphasized by Dr. Mohsin is there. The area that are highlighted in the pink are the one that are mostly affected with arthritis, and the one with blue, meaning the ischial tuberosity, iliac bone, the Achilles tendon, and the anserine bursa, these are the most common sites that are affected by the enthesopathy. This is the very simple test for the sacroiliac pain. If the patient, especially a young patient coming to us with buttock pain, which wakes him up at nights as well, this simple clinical test will tell you whether sacroiliac joints are involved or not. We ask the patient to lie down, flexed his knee, laterally rotate his hip joint, and then we put a little pressure on the bent knee. The patient usually report pain on the contralateral sacroiliac joint. It can be on the same joint as well. This is very sensitive to identify that there is inflammation at the sacroiliac joint. Schober's test, it has already been told. Now, occiput to wall distance, it is normal for everybody of us sitting here. But as the spine fuses in ankylosing spondylitis, this distance continues to increase. Chest expansion is also reduced in later on. Now, the lab tests are usually non-specific and might not lead you to any conclusion. 50 to 70% of the patient, only 50 to 70% of patients with active ankylosing spondylitis have raised acute phase reactant, including ESR and CRP. So if we rely on these two tests, we would miss more than 50% of the patient if they have normal CRP or ESR. Now the term seronegative spondyloarthropathy comes from the negativity of rheumatoid factor or anti-CCP antibody, which are usually prescribed for the patient with aches and pains. HLA-B27, Dr. Mohsen talked about it. 90 to 95% of patients with ankylosing spondylitis has it, but 10% of normal population does have positive HLA-B27 test. This doesn't mean that those 10% also have got ankylosing spondylitis. So this test is not diagnostic for ankylosing spondylitis. Yes, if a person have HLA-B27 positive, there is a 5 to 10% risk that they will develop ankylosing spondylitis or related pathology in the future. So the diagnosis generally made on clinical and radiological basis. In radiology, the most common or the most important thing is the inflammatory changes at the sacroiliac joint. Early diagnosis depends upon the findings that were mentioned previously. The inflammation at the vertebra, meaning shiny corner, squaring of the vertebra, sacroiliac joint inflammation, and even the power Doppler ultrasound will tell us about the active enthesopathy. Now, with the advent of MRI, we were able to diagnose our patients earlier on. The MRI is very helpful in not only early diagnosis of the disease, but also to monitor the disease activity and the treatment response. Now, this is the criteria which was initially used in 1984, proposed in 1984, but if you can appreciate, it already mentions there is limitation of the motion, limitation of the chest expansion, and there is definitive X-ray findings, meaning this is the stage when the patient already have structural damage, and we do not want this one to happen to our patient. And the problem was that at that age, we did not have much to offer to the patient as well, and MRI was not easily available in every part of the world. If you can appreciate that before this dotted line, this is a big number of years when the patient might be suffering from ankylosing spondylitis or inflammatory backache or inflammatory arthropathy, but was not being able to diagnose because of the lack of the effective modality. Later on, when back pain was there, radiographic sacroiliitis was there, it means that the disease is established and there is much less to be done. Now, this is the period which is now labeled as non-radiological axial spondyloarthropathy. Now, in 2009, another criteria was proposed, which is much user-friendly, and it is in the effort to diagnose the patient in much earlier on. It is very simple that a young patient who has got inflammatory back pain, which is there for more than 3 months, have sacroiliitis on imaging, and at least one of these inflammatory or in one of these spondyloarthropathy features, then we can easily label that patient with 84% specificity that they are suffering from axial spondyloarthropathy. Now, coming to the topic, the goal of management are just like the other diseases. We want our patient to have relief from the symptoms, maintain their function, prevention of complication of the spinal disease, and minimizing the extraspinal and extra-articular manifestations. The conventional medical treatment include patient education, which is very important. They should know that this is a lifelong disease. The treatment or management will be lifelong, and the disease will have a remitting intermittent relapses, and it may be controlled on certain treatment, but will relapse due to various causes. Smoking cessation is very important, and there is clear data which tells us that the patients or the people who smoke have increased incidence of spondyloarthropathy. They have worse disease than the others and have lesser response to the treatment modalities. NSAIDs, which usually are people take for the painkiller reason, but it is an anti-inflammatory drug, and it is the first line of treatment in ankylosing spondylitis to reduce the pain and inflammation in our patient. If one NSAID is ineffective in its full therapeutic dose taken for like 2 to 3 weeks, we should switch to another family of the NSAID to provide relief. Corticosteroid, which is very much used in rheumatological disorders, but they are not very helpful in patients with ankylosing spondylitis. If needed for peripheral arthritis, they should be given for very smaller or very shorter period. And especially we like to give it, or we would want to give it as a local corticosteroid at the site of inflammation, maybe sacroiliitis or the arthritis. Sulfasalazine, it is one of the oral conventional DMARDs. It is not very effective, but has been found to reduce the AM stiffness and is effective in patient having peripheral arthritis. Now there comes the hero of the treatment of ankylosing spondylitis, TNF alpha inhibitor. With the advent or with the approval of TNF inhibitor, there was a dramatic change in the life of the patient suffering from ankylosing spondylitis. There has been a lot of data which shows that it reduces the inflammation, reduces the pain, and reduces the progress of the disease. And if started earlier on in the course of the disease, the patient might not develop all those horrible postures that Dr. Mohsin showed to us. There are multiple TNF inhibitor available: etanercept, infliximab, adalimumab, golimumab, sertolizumab. They are all tongue twisters, but they are very much effective in the treatment of ankylosing spondylitis. We are very lucky to have etanercept available in our country. At the same time, we have biosimilars of etanercept, infliximab, and adalimumab in the pipeline, which are helping our patients. Although they are very costly, not easily available to every patient. But
Tyra, 1 minute, please.
Okay. मैंने तुमसे कहा था बोलना नहीं. Okay, in a prospective study, it has shown more than 50% of reduction in the risk of the radiographic progression of ankylosing spondylitis. But the thing is that the patient should be screened for latent tuberculosis, hepatitis B, HIV, and but at the same time, it can be given in patients who have got chronic hepatitis C. And if the patient has got latent tuberculosis or active hepatitis B, we can start the patient on treatment, and later on, after a month, we can start TNF inhibitor. There are certain toxicities which are patient really horrified from, but with proper counseling, they do get the TNF inhibitor and feel comfortable with it. Interleukin-17 is another hero. They are rapidly taking the horizon and improving the patient's condition. There are 2 of them available, secukinumab and ixekizumab. Secukinumab has very 2 powerful trials, Measure 1 and 2 and Prevent trial, which showed very good response. More than 60% of the patient achieved ASAS 20 to 40. That's why they got approved. And ixekizumab, although has been used in other parts of the world, but their trials did not show that effective response as compared to interleukin-17. Physical therapy and exercise is the mainstay of the therapy. It should be patient-tailored, and proper education regarding daily postures and erect posture in the routine life is suggested. Water therapy is very helpful. Exercises, postural training, and this would be my last concluding slide, that if we are able to diagnose our patient as a case of ankylosing spondylitis, the first thing would be education, exercise, which stays to all type of inflammatory arthritis, axial or peripheral or both. NSAID stays for both axial and peripheral disease, but after NSAID, we only have biologic therapy for spondyloarthropathy, which is involving axial spine. For peripheral, we can try sulfasalazine, local corticosteroid, and biologics. Thank you.